So for our last presentation of today, we have members of the staff from Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission, MVRPC. It has been serving the planning needs of the region since 1964. It's the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, for Montgomery, Miami, Greene, and part of Warren counties, and also supports regional and environmental planning for those and additional surrounding counties. Altogether, the staff at MVRPC has decades of experience in transportation, land use, environmental planning, research, and GIS. It's really a brilliant group who I had the good fortune to intern for in 2018. I spent most of that summer playing in traffic, or doing traffic counts, I guess. And today, some of the team from MVRPC is going to share with us how they've been using GIS technologies to engage the public on community planning projects while this pandemic is keeping us from coming together in more traditional ways. So Martin, Catherine, Elizabeth, Milo, Tom, you guys ready?
Yes, thanks, Jen. Good afternoon, everyone. Martin Kim from Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission. We have developed this tradition of wearing a hat whenever we give a presentation, thanks to Catherine and other staff members. So we decided to continue that tradition, and looking for the right type of hat, I decided to, and actually I was voluntold by staff members that I should wear a hat to bring everyone's attention to this last session. So I'm wearing a hard hat. I'm gonna take it off pretty soon. I'm not gonna continue with this hat. However, today's session is we would like to showcase our tools, but not the type of tools that would require these type of hard hat, but rather we will showcase how MVRPC leveraged GIS technologies to supplement traditional public engagement efforts for a community planning effort. So with that, I'm gonna move on to the slide. So can you see this? So everyone can see this?
Yes.
Okay. So MVRPC's Department of Community and Regional Planning provides professional planning and GIS services to our members. Often we participate in a variety of different planning projects as a planning team member as they conduct comprehensive land use or corridor planning projects. Our planning and GIS team brings diverse expertise, extensive credentials, and nearly 80 years of combined professional experiences to member organizations for their successful planning and policy development efforts. The type of services varies depending on the nature of the project, but typically we provide planning process consultation, project scope development, data analysis and mapping, and group facilitation services, to name a few. The COVID-19 pandemic surely changed our lives and our work environment. Many of us are working from home and using virtual conference and communication tools like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and so forth. For our planning work, it introduced a great challenge in the field of public engagement. And you see two very different scenes of public meetings before and after COVID-19. Pre-COVID, it was a public gathering event with close proximity amongst participants at an indoor facility, as you can see on the left. Post-COVID, there was hardly no public meeting, pause on pretty much all planning projects. If there is a public meeting, it was an outdoor event with limited number of people, and of course, mask up for everyone. With many of our communities' ongoing planning projects suddenly put on hold in late March due to COVID-19 pandemic and statewide stay-at-home order, many of our planning work was on hold, hoping that this pandemic will end pretty soon. After about 2 months, many members realized that this will not end anytime soon, and as such, they began looking for ways to resume planning work, including public engagement. The COVID-19 pandemic certainly has limited and challenged the way we do public participation, but it also allowed us to seek and explore new opportunities and approaches to seek innovative solutions. MVRPC staff began exploring new approaches and tools. This immediate investigation was to ensure we find innovative approaches in addressing the challenges of fostering meaningful public participation by leveraging our technical capacity. Through our exploration and investigation, we have equipped ourselves with a new suite of online GIS tools that range from conducting online polling to online interactive application for gathering locational input. Some of these tools have already been launched, and so we would like to share how MVRPC leveraged GIS technologies to supplement traditional public engagement efforts for community planning projects. The first project is Greene County Perspective 2040 Future Land Use Plan Update Project, which began in January of this year. So we're going to talk about different tools that we employed for this project. The second project that we're going to showcase is Miamisburg CARES Neighborhood Planning Project. This project was off to a good start back in November of 2019, and then was on hold for a while due to COVID-19. The project has resumed with a new online public engagement tool that we had the pleasure of developing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Milo to talk about the Greene County Perspective 2040. Milo?
Awesome. Thank you, Martin. So yeah, with all that, Greene County is one of the projects that we've kind of had to adjust because of the COVID pandemic. So Perspectives 2040 is Greene County's future land use plan update. Essentially, it is a comprehensive set of guidelines and plans for how land should be used within the county. It's kind of building off of Perspectives 2020, which was the previous plan, which of course expires in 2020. So we want to do it every 20 or so years. So some of the goals of it are preserving farmland, strategic land development, stuff like that to make sure that the county use their land wisely. You can go to the next slide, Martin. And so this was our timeline originally before COVID decided to make a guest appearance. The project started in January, and we were able to get to about mid-March. We'd actually just had one steering committee meeting in person when everything kind of shifted virtually, and we had to adjust from there. So as you can see, we had pre-COVID meeting, that was our steering committee meeting, and now COVID is just virtual Zoom, Microsoft Teams, that sort of stuff. And so our original plan was to have it wrapped up and implemented by December of 2020. And that's not quite looking like what we'll be able to do because of pushing things back and adjusting things. But of course, we're still trying to get it finished as quickly as possible within realistic time frame. Next slide, please. So we developed a few tools to try to get public input on the plan because that's vital to a plan for an entire county, of course. Seeing what the people think, what they want to see their county look like in the future, and getting all that valuable input. And so we developed a few tools. On the left side, you'll see Survey 123, and then Mentimeter / live polling. These are some of the early things we implemented around March, April, May. Trying to figure out what we could do to try to make up for the lack of in-person meetings and in-person input gathering. And they all have their merits. Survey 123 is really good for asking, survey-related questions. Unfortunately, there are some drawbacks. You're only allowed to ask one geographic-related question. So only one question, like, put a dot here or click on the map where you want to see X thing. Mentimeter and live polling were kind of some things we played with as far as during meetings, asking polls in the middle of the meetings, and those went well. We got good input, but we're not quite able to get a lot of public input at these meetings. And on the top right is the hub site. If you want to click on that real fast, Martin. The hub site is a place for us to put everything, kind of like a one-stop shop, a hub, if you will, for all of Greene County's opportunities for input gathering, like it says on there, and different just descriptions of what the plan is and what it does and what it means for the people of Greene County. So this is a really good way to have a centralized location where if someone doesn't know anything about the project necessarily, or wants to see how they can provide their input, they can go to this website, click on a few things, find a few surveys, and they'll be well educated on what the plan is. And so back to the PowerPoint, the bottom right is the Crowdsource reporter. You can just stay on that, Martin. I can talk about that. The Crowdsource reporter is an application that Esri has on the website on GIS, and it is a way to get input from the public, and you're able to divvy it up into different categories. So we wanted to collect strong, weak, and opportunity locations within Greene County. And so we created this app, which has the 3 categories, and people were able to click somewhere in Greene County, select if it was strong, weak, or opportunity, provide comments, and we're able to compare that with what maybe the steering committee said, or what other public input has said, and look at that. For example, if you maybe want to click on any of them really, like the Beaver Creek Bike Station, you can see that someone said it's great for the community parking and all this stuff. And so we're able to like spatially see what people were thinking within Greene County. And it was fairly simple to put together, as with a lot of Esri products. There were some kinks that didn't quite play well, but it included a lot of production on their website, not too much on ArcMap, so that was really helpful, not having to do too much nitty-grittiness. And there's a lot of options and flexibility in some ways, but in some ways not. For example, we can't change any of the fonts. Some of the colors were kind of hard to figure out how to change. But thankfully, we were able to finish a product that kind of came out looking pretty simple and clean. And we were able to get a lot of valuable input for the county on this. And so that is the Crowdsource reporter. And on the next slide, some of the things that we learned from doing this for the Perspectives 2040 land use plan is outreach and advertisement is big when it comes to doing things virtually. A lot of people might not be aware of what is out there. So we needed to do a lot of outreach and advertisement to Greene County to make sure that people knew that we were making these online mediums of collecting input, or else no one would really be able to know that it's out there. And it's kind of similar to that paper versus electronic. A lot of people still preferred paper means. For example, we had a pop-up event at Yellow Springs where we were able to leave some pamphlets out with QR codes and links to the website. We had an alternative paper ballot that they could fill out and kind of provide their input that way if they prefer to do it that way. And we had a lot of paper input versus electronic input. You would think that electronic would be very simple just to fill out, but there's still a pretty clear preference for filling out a piece of paper, mailing it in, as opposed to accessing these electronic apps. On the bottom left, simplicity in GIS, kind of going back to the maps that seem like they were really wrong, but not everyone has the GIS or geography know-how that many of us do. So being able to communicate how to use the apps and the way to just be able to navigate them. We made some videos for these apps to help people out. So we did what we could to show people how to utilize them. But sometimes there is a bit of a technology gap between the things we create and the knowledge of people. And on the bottom right is technical limitations. So as we all know, Esri, ArcMap, all that stuff loves to not play very well. So thankfully, like I said, I did not have to use much ArcMap to create this. It was all online, so it was fairly straightforward with some kinks still, such as, not being able to change small little things that you think you'd be able to change on the app. But for what it needed to be, it was did very well. We collected all the input. It came in very smoothly, and we were able to close it, keep the input, and it worked really well. And so that is a quick overview of the Perspectives 2040 public input gathering that we've done since the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think I will hand it over to Catherine now.
Okay, thanks, Milo. Oh no, there's an echo. Everybody else hear me okay? Thumbs up, good, thanks, Jen. All right, so one of the benefits of Milo going first is really that it actually was true for these projects as well. So they were kind of our guinea pigs. We were able to just kind of ride those coattails. While the Greene County was a countywide plan, these types of tools were actually useful for smaller scale as well. For Miamisburg CARES, this was a neighborhood level program. And before I keep going, I do want to point out that CARES is an acronym that Miamisburg was using before the federal government picked it up and used it in a very different context. So for Miamisburg, their CARES program is a neighborhood enhancement program that focuses specifically on capital improvements at the neighborhood level. So this is completely different from the CARES Act from the federal government. This has nothing to do with their funding. If they had the federal government level of funding, they probably wouldn't need us. They'd be able to do everything they wanted to. So Miamisburg has been using this acronym for a few years. It's their own thing, nothing to do with COVID. It is a partnership between residents, city officials, and community organizations. And back in 2019, which seems like a very long time ago, they reached out to the land bank, who also then in turn reached out to us to help determine the next CARES project somewhere within Miamisburg. And they had an idea that they wanted to go out to the west side along the river to determine exactly where they wanted to go and improve. So they reached out to us, and in October then we sat down with some of the planning staff to look over some of the existing conditions, trying to get a better understanding of the environment. You see, we produced a lot of maps and some deep dive into Excel. You can see an example of some of that mapping there on the right there. For scale of reference, we're really looking at an area of about a couple hundred parcels, so a fairly small neighborhood. This is an area that is quite hilly, and there's an elementary school, which is what is being represented by that large blue rectangle there in the middle, just to get a kind of understanding of sort of the topography and the general lay of the land. It's an older population, although again, there's a little bit of an elementary school population there in terms of the demographics. So after we sat down with planning staff, we extended that out to the rest of city staff to begin to discuss what they saw were the strengths and weaknesses of the neighborhood itself. And we also wanted to go ahead and finalize the boundary. This is all typical planning level items. SWOT analysis, those of you in the know have seen this done 100 times, and it started off just as routine as could be. So we had our process diagram, we had our existing conditions, and then we wanted to go ahead and start to see what else we could do. So next slide. So things are going smoothly. The community specialist takes what we've done to city council. The strategy you see on the left, nope, Martin back. Strategy you see on the left there was laid out for the council. They said go for it. That was at the middle of February, and then March happened and we came to a standstill. So what are we going to do? Next slide, Martin. Well, we need to pivot to what everyone is now terming as our quote unquote new normal. And so at least for a couple of weeks, we sit there and we're not twiddling our thumbs, but we're not being able to really, we're just kind of spinning our wheels. What are we going to do? And so we start to try to take a look at that next piece because we need to go to those residents and gather input, but we can't do it with a physical presence. So how are we going to accomplish this? Well, we're going to enter that in Esri's Experience Builder and Crowdsource Reporter. So next slide. So Milo kind of gave a nice overview of some of how it looks from the user's end. And so we really did not, when we find something that works, we try to use it generally the same way and then tweak and improve as we can. So I'm going to show you a little bit more from the back end and what it might look like from the user's end itself. So this, you see a whole lot of buttons. So for those of you who are not familiar with how this is, true to Esri fashion, it is not exactly structured like their previous tools. Every tool always has a little bit from the old version, but then a lot different from the new. And so it's not a lot of taking old information to new information. You have to completely relearn a new product. So this is not structured exactly like the hub, and so there is that bit of a learning curve. They are trying to keep things simpler in some levels. There's a lot less having to dive in, but there's a lot more of those ribbon effects. And so instead of just like that top ribbon where we used to have maybe on a Word doc, now you've got them exactly like they might have in Arc Desktop with the buttons every which way. So when you're working on this, the nice thing is a lot can be discovered simply by just clicking on things and kind of poking around. It does allow you to just try to get in there and see what you can do. There are different layouts that you can pick. The thing is, unless you have a strong idea of what it is that you want to build, in our experience, it really doesn't matter what layout you pick because all of the functionalities seem to be available within the different layouts. So if you don't have an idea, just pick something and start going. In this tiny, tiny text that you can't see up in the top left where it's slightly wider than the other, you would see new. And that's where that like teal bar that matches my sweater is underneath. And that's to add in something new itself. If you pick a layout, they have all these pending elements, which is just that slight tab to the right there. And so that's all you have to do is just delete out certain things or add in others as you see fit. So in that sense, it really doesn't matter what you pick. You can just choose something and go for it. Unlike hubs, it's not completely reliant on cards or text. They do have those options. But you can do a lot of other choices. So you can obviously input a map and also some of the separate map elements, like the legend, for example. This makes sense because, of course, Esri is going to be primarily about maps. So it's glad to see that that's up there front and to the left, if not exactly center. But the nice thing about Experience Builder is it does try to make it a little bit more like a website itself. So it functions like that general website. You can create headers, text, you can put in images or links. You can also specifically embed your survey 123 by clicking on the survey button. And we'll see what that looks like on the next slide. So we built something very basic, very bare bones. It's a lot of scrolling, depending. This is just a screenshot, so it's just the top of it. But we have our written instructions for what it is that we're asking users to do when we're going to go out to the residents and try to encourage them to create. And I should back up a little bit because when the pandemic started, the residents were not really aware that we were going to be going out. They weren't expecting. Unlike Greene County, which had begun a little bit of the process, was starting to get some steam on this, we had not really done that. And so we needed to try to reach out to residents, reach out to the businesses, and have them become involved and start to get their understanding, get their input for what it is they wanted to see within this neighborhood. And so we are trying to build this website through Experience Builder that they can go and to actually create their pieces and begin to fill out both a survey and a map to decide what areas specifically need improvement. So when we are building this website, we are trying to showcase all of the different items that we want them to do. And so we have, again, basic written instructions. We can have links. We have that embedded survey that plays very nicely within this. So rather than just sending the residents and saying, hey, here's what we want you to do, and we want you to go to this link and click on this survey and take the survey, and now we need you to X out of this, and now we need you to go over here and do this mapping. That does not have to be separate pieces. You can have it all in one experience site. And so for that, it helped simplify things and allow people to stay in one page and understand fully what it is that we were asking. We did have external links in case of anything being wonky, because building in repetition is something that is always advisable. But for the most part, building this in allowed it to be one central location that we could go ahead and put out all of the information that we're trying to give out. The other nice thing about the Experience Builder site is by doing this, we did not have to trouble Miamisburg's IT department or have to try to put anything up on the city's website. We could just throw this up, it becomes live. You can turn it off simply by stopping to share. You can just stop sharing it and it turns itself off. And that then helps reduce the amount of, collaboration is not a bad thing, but you don't have to necessarily take up another department's time with something that you may need from that. You can go ahead and just do it yourself. So next slide. So one of the nicer things about Experience Builder, which we had had frustrations before in some of the other Esri products, is that now Esri allows you to really customize based off of the device that you're using. Don't know if anyone ever remembers Web App Builder, and they would basically show you what something would look like no matter the device that you would use. Something was always off. And you would build the site and we would test out, what does it look like desktop? What does it look like mobile? What does it look like on a tablet? And at some point we just kind of had to shrug our shoulders and go, well, this is what it is. We can't necessarily change it without making it detrimental to a different device. With Experience Builder, you can actually tailor your website depending on the environment that you're expecting users to experience it in. So you can build it out on desktop. And then they also have a tablet and a phone preview buttons that you can then actually play and customize. So if a user is coming at it through the phone, you can then make certain elements then appear in certain ways. And so this was really handy and allowed things to kind of clean up and play a little bit nicer. The other, I guess, downside potentially, and things we just also need to keep in mind, using words like neighborhood unfortunately just does not fit on a phone if you're going to have it on a header, and that's unfortunately you can still have ugly text. So it fixes things. It's a good start, but it's not going to necessarily fix everything. So next slide. So as Milo mentioned before, when going through, they also had used Crowdsource Reporter, and they were Greene County kind of helped blaze our path for understanding what it is we wanted to do. Because part of the things we were asking residents, besides that general survey of what you liked and disliked about your neighborhood, was what areas did you think were strong, what areas did you think were weak, and what areas did you see future opportunity to build upon in the neighborhood itself. These are questions we had asked the staff in person back in 2019, and now we were trying to ask the residents the same question. When you're looking at a large map in a study room and you've got groups of people and they're talking about what it is that they're agreeing upon or disagreeing, and they're placing their dots all together, that was not something we could do for this case. So how do you get that same amount of information, but actually then get it without having to have that joint conversation? And so to this end, Crowdsource Reporter was very instrumental for this. So what we did here was we did, again, 3 separate web maps. We're trying to, within this itself, and again, I'll kind of tell a little bit more from the back end, we had to try to emphasize the instructions for users, especially people who are not familiar. This is brand new to us. You can only imagine what it's like for the public. That there's no real place on the application for like a clear set of instructions. And a lot of the work that we do at MVRPC is trying just to take existing technology and then cheat or tweak it to the best of our abilities. So one of the ways we tried, besides just that Experience Builder site with the written instructions, was to also have that README splash screen to have some of the information about how to fill out these mapping. We also have in the top right, there's that small circle with the question mark in it, and that's for more details. And we just went ahead and reiterated the instructions there, so that if you clicked on it as like a help, here's a way that you can go ahead, and that would be an extra step for our users to indicate. So when we were building the mapping application, or the Crowdsource Reporter application itself, we separated things out. It was very tempting to try to put it all on one map, but we felt, 1, that would be too busy, 2, that would get kind of complicated. The way that you can build this within Crowdsource Reporter, we built this all through AGOL. So sometimes I'm used to building shape files on desktop and then uploading them and then working from there. However, with AGOL, we just created from that feature layer, we used just the point. We thought about points, lines, and polygons, but for simplicity's sake, we just stuck with the point. We felt basically because there was a space for commenting, which if you were to click on any one of those points, this is not a live demo, but if you were to click on the points like Milo had shown, those comments come up. And so we felt there that the points would show enough information for what it is that we needed, and adding polygons would just be unnecessarily complicated for the user. So we did try to cheat a little bit, and we made the 3 web maps. One for the strengths, one for weaknesses, one for opportunities, but each of them were basically the exact same map at the exact same zoom extent. That is something that you can set within the Crowdsource reporter itself, was how far in that you want to go, and so setting that zoom extent was where was key for that. You can pick colors and styles, as Milo mentioned, for some of those. Fonts, not so much, but otherwise you're largely good to go. So next slide. The other nice thing about Crowdsource Reporter that we ended up taking advantage of for this Miamisburg was trying to find out the level of agreement that residents would have. And so to this end, we allowed people to vote on locations. So much like you might have within an actual public workshop, you'd have a group of people putting their dots together, and as they would talk, they'd say, you know what, yeah, I agree, this area is really great, or no, you know what, this area needs a lot of work, I'm going to put my dot here too. And you can start to see that build up. We had how many people could go ahead and input their own dots, but then also look at what their neighbors were posting and saying, you know what, I agree. We did not, there's no disagree. You can either agree, and then that's what's being shown here in the vote totals there on the right. So when you are doing this, there is a little bit of setup that has to occur. This is something much like, again, previous Esri applications. You have to have this down within the feature layer itself. So when you're building out the tables within that layer, you have to have a dedicated spot for those votes to go. When they're hitting that submit button, Esri's basically keeping a tally, and you have to tell it where it's going to be storing that. So here we had setting up that database properly first. We had to create a field that we in the end just called vote. It's an integer, and then you just tell the application where you're going to store those votes. And then feature downloading that layer. If you aren't ever downloading it off the desktop, you will be down to your desktop. You would be able to go ahead and have all those totals that are therefore maintained in that layer. So you can see when just sort of looking at some of those vote totals, you can start to see really high areas like that 1 second from the bottom, that Westover Park. 9 people agreed that, yeah, this area needs a lot of work, and it's becoming a bit of an issue. So whereas maybe only 1 person thought that the drainage culvert over on Siebert, the 737, was an issue. So we can start to see, again, where there are high areas of coalescence, where high amounts of people are starting to agree on certain ideas and what maybe you really need to start targeting. So next slide. So what were some of our lessons learned? We had quite a few that we learned overall through the process, including some unexpected twists and turns. And the first lesson that we learned through the mail survey, costs and benefits. Mail survey tend to function like an advertisement for the online tools. So while the website was already in place, we had to get getting the literature through the mail and then pointing out the link for people to submit input instead of hassling with a stamp and sending it out through the postal service. In the end, the mail survey ended up kind of accidentally turning more people on to our online application. So it added eyeballs then to that online total, and it probably then also, here, just click on this link. It did probably unexpectedly help us jump the turnout for the input that we got. The second lesson that we learned was sort of how we felt when we were starting to get input. So as we started getting the submissions rolling in through the online, and then they started trickling in through the mail was maybe 1/3 of what we actually got through the online version. So online really did seem to be more of a popular, which was somewhat surprising because we knew the demographics of the area skewed older. And so it does seem to speak to people's overall comfort with technology that this really can start to work even in older graying neighborhoods. So let's see. The third lesson, and this one is a bit specific. It is really hard to showcase items without accidentally leading people on. Within the Crowdsource reporter itself, one of the things we tried to do to get people to understand what it was that they needed to do within the instructions, we placed a sample point where things were. Some of those sample points we maybe placed a little bit too well, even though we called them literally example. Some of those places actually got 4 votes, probably because the exact point itself was located in a spot. Even though I set it outside the boundaries, it was apparently a spot 4 people felt actually did need some work. So it was maybe perhaps a little bit too well placed. So if you are placing an example point, you want to make sure that it is immediately obvious, both in terms of where and what it's being called. The fourth lesson, in this case, technology really in this case worked better for how this workshop format because of the increased participation that we got. In the end, we had, again, if we have a couple hundred parcels, we had 45 different people taking advantage of the survey and mapping exercise. And this is larger than some of the other workshops we've had. It's smaller than others, but we've been able to capture, I think, more results than just a simple pen and paper exercise. When you're working with a public workshop, it requires people to commit to a certain same time and place. It requires area planners can know how hard it is to engage people at the same set of time. So having something asynchronous, which is, probably the new word for 2020, and an asynchronous format allows more time for participation to take place. Also, the other thing, when you're working in a public workshop, so much good input is usually said in the course of these group functions, but so few people actually take the time to write down everything that's being said. It's such a chore, and most people, you lose 90% of what's being said. Because of this technology and sort of doing it on your own and having the space to type out the comments, everything is being recorded and you don't need to have anybody else do that for you. So that means the feedback that was given was more prolific than we probably would have gotten in an additional in-person workshop. So that's all I have. If you go to next. And so if anybody else wants to join us in the Crowdsource Reporter and Online Engagement Revolution, welcome to have it. At this point, take any questions.
Well, Catherine, I'm going to mute you. This is really impressive, and I think it's interesting that one of the things you pointed out was that the amount of public participation that you received out of 100 parcels of 45, in some cases is actually higher than what you might have had before, and we experienced that today. We had more people show up today to this GIS day than I think we did last year. Probably in total, maybe not everybody massive critical mass all at once. But this was really interesting, and what I wanted to ask you was how you found the transition to Experience Builder from Web App Builder, because I have yet to dip my toe into Experience Builder, but it is clearly the way of the future with this. And you're muted, so unmute yourself. Here, I can't.
Did you intentionally quote Leonardo DiCaprio from The Aviator? Because that really goes with like their.
Sorry. My computer is slow. Is it working?
Yeah, it's working.
Okay. It's lagging in terms of, there it is. For me, I think it's one of those I'm going to compare this now to census products, although it's not quite as infuriating. Web App Builder is kind of like Fact Finder in the sense that it's been finely honed. There's a bunch of still tools that are relatively well developed further along. Experience Builder, I think, is good and will be more powerful in the end. I still think there's some kinks that need to be worked out. So it kind of depends exactly on what it is that you're trying to pull from it. So we were using Experience Builder pretty lightly, just in the sense of, here's a way that I can build a website that's meant to be a website. We've used that before with Hub as well. Again, like with Greene County, we had done that earlier with some of our other projects as well. And that was really that was us shoehorning in a solution for people who don't have the time or money to keep up an independent website. And Experience Builder, I think, lets you do that faster. So it kind of, I can see it more of like a more powerful version of Cascade, what the story maps used to be.
Yeah.
So I think they're trying to add some of that functionality from story maps and the website within it itself. But so I still prefer Web App Builder for the actual mapping functionalities. But I imagine in a couple of years, maybe my plans will change.
We did have a question from Andrew Wilson of City of Oxford. I think these tools will be very helpful for Oxford as we begin a comprehensive plan update in 2021. Can you talk more about the mailer?
The mail survey?
I'm assuming.
Okay. So what we ended up doing, okay. So luckily the community specialist in Miamisburg led the survey portion. So what we tried to do was just have a few basic questions on a one sheet for people, again, and whatever language we had, I think it was like 7 questions, and whatever questions we had on the mailer, we then completely replicated on survey 1, 2, 3. For the mapping exercise version of the mailer, we created, and this was based off of what had been done in Greene County, but we made it small scale. We created just 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper with the study area on it, and then had room for people to write a little bit off to the side, and mailed them all sticky dots and said, please place 3 dots on this, number the dots, and then explain your reasoning off to the side. So we did have 16 people return that there, so it did work. But I imagine between the cost of postage and return postage, this was mailed out to everybody there. So it was, again, a couple hundred parcels. So it was a slightly expensive endeavor for the city to undertake. The benefit, I think, was because we had that online piece. We also had that, again, if you don't want to return this via the mail, you can just go ahead and fill out. We have the exact same questions and content online, and that probably then also further encouraged people to go ahead and do that. In terms of other outreach, the city was aware of a neighborhood Facebook group and had gotten a couple of people to post some things to there as well. So, Martin, am I missing anything?
No, I mean, those are all good points. I mean, we didn't expect people to use online engagement tool, but rather we were expecting them to fill out the hard copy survey and then the questionnaire. So that's why we provided an online tool as a companion piece or the supplemental piece rather than a primary piece. After we are all done, we were surprised to see that there were more people participating through the online. So at the end of the process, we all said, well, maybe we shouldn't have spent so much time and money on sending out or putting together the hard copy and then sending out the hard copy survey, because I guess a low return on investment, if you will. However, going in, when we were putting our thoughts together, we didn't expect this to happen. So.
Yeah, and the other thing that was sent out that the city did is they did a reminder postcard. And I think if we were to do this in the future, or if we were to advise communities who maybe didn't have a whole lot of money, if you were going to do just one thing, a postcard with a link or something to send out, so that way you can have it. That would be a cheaper option as well.
Like with a QR code that takes you directly to the tool itself.
Or even just a link, just a type in link, because the nice thing is you can, with those share links, those it's a link. It's like arcg.is, and then exactly. It functions like a bit.ly, but it's got 6. So that was very easy to share. And I think by now, I have one of them memorized, even though it's gobbledygook. But, it's like 15 characters, so it's not so bad.
Right. And then, as Milo mentioned during his presentation, we were able to put together a pretty cool application. However, if nobody knows about it, then, it's like useless. In the Miamisburg case, because we were sending out the hard copy survey to every single resident, that kind of functioned as a advertising piece. So they knew where to go to fill out and to provide input online.
I had just recently this year, in working with Community Planning Insights in the Village of Yellow Springs comprehensive plan update, I had just learned about the concept of dots. So you said that you had sent out 3 sticky dots labeled 1, 2, and 3 in the mail. Is there a setting in ArcGIS Builder that prevents or that limits the number of hearts or likes that the users could give to each area? And would that be something that you would want, or was it really helpful to be able to have people give as many sticky dots as they wanted?
So there is not a limitation for what you can do to like. You cannot necessarily you can't go in and just hit your like button 6 times. That is not a thing. But you could go ahead and just completely agree with what other people had said. So when we do things in a public workshop with the sticky dots, it was more of a trying to tune between what we would normally do on a large map and how many dots we might give a person versus, what can we actually see. If we gave somebody 10 dots, in the end we ended up with 3. I think a lot of that was just partially due to size and constraint. So if we give somebody 10 dots, where are they going to place them, or is it we're all going to lose meaning? Because the point of the dots, and this is sort of that, if I go back into some of my cartography lessons, when you have a static map and you put a sticky dot on it, as a planner, we're not interested in that specific intersection per se. You're going to call it out, but generally it's supposed to be, this is describing an area, so that way there is the things that are a little bit off. When you have an interactive map, though, you can absolutely zoom down and actually pinpoint that intersection. This is what I want. So there's that level of precision online that you just don't have on a static map on paper. That is something that we just kind of have to keep in mind. So it's really more about letting the online understand that the things are sort of coalescing, again, generalizing for areas, and that the comments itself will kind of provide the specificity. So to that end, it was really we printed off the sheet. We had a couple of dots from previous exercises that we put down, and then I went to Office Depot to see what could be mailed out, because trying to get supplies in a pandemic, you're not trying to have people go shopping unnecessarily. What can you order? So these are the colors that were available. So that's part of the reason why, our colors differed a little bit from what Greene County had done. Was here are the dots that are available. So those are the dots I'm going to buy. These are now going to be the colors that we want to match the colors that they get in the mail with the colors that are featured on the online application. Just again to kind of keep some of that stuff the same. And then once you get the paper back, then it's a little bit of that inexact science of trying to match things up, which you can do largely because of the written comments. So.
Do you think that you would do a hybrid approach in the future, or was this such a raging success that you're going to stick with the online for the most part?
Martin?
I think it'll be all dependent upon what project you're doing, and then how large the geography or the project area is, and so forth. One thing that I will say is that a lot of the online tool development, I think we always wanted to do this, but we never really had extra motivation to do it. So we were kind of kicking the can and then just putting it to the back burner. And then COVID, it just forced us to do it. So in a way, I guess one good thing about COVID is that it forced us to think innovative solutions, and then push us to come up with a tool that we always wanted to do, but we never kind of got lazy and then never did it.
I can relate to that. You don't, it's always, well, I'll get to it later. And then suddenly it's like, later's here and I need it now.
Exactly.
The other thing that, since this is we're talking about using GIS to, in the planning context. And one of the things that we did was we developed a tool, and then we thought it was a very clear instruction. And then we tested that out with a beta tester, like general public. And then they were not understanding what we were asking them to do. So we had to put a lot of extra effort and then kind of think think outside the GIS professionals jargon or the area, and then we had to put a lot of kind of customers or the general public's perspective. And then one of the things that we ended up doing was, this is what Milo did. We ended up creating a video with the online screen, so we can explain to them what they need to do. Still, there is one field that I think was a name of the place, and then people start to put their own name. So I guess we will enhance that next time. But
well, this was a great presentation, which is also being echoed in the comments. I'm really happy to see somebody working already so in depth with Experience Builder, because that's more and more we're hearing that's the way of the future with Esri. A lot of thanks coming in, and I think that it'll be interesting to see how MVRPC continues to utilize this technology, because you guys are on the bleeding edge of Esri's tech in this area, and every time I see your maps, I'm always so impressed. Also, if you need any utility data for that part of Miamisburg, let me know, because we just got done doing a big utility inventory.
Yes, we are aware of that. And the other thing is, we went to we joined the ESRI user conference, the virtual conference, and actually that's when we learned and heard and learned quite a bit about Experience Builder. So actually, because it was a virtual, and then we were able to attend, that in turn allow us to, Experience Builder, what is that? Let's take a look at it, and then we were able to kind of use for the project. So that worked out just fine.
And we do have one comment from Mike Lucas saying, we've always tried to expand the avenues for all sorts of folks to participate. These new tools are awesome, but we also have to be careful to not lose others that aren't comfortable with the new online tools, and the paper mailers were useful in this case, a great hybrid. And I think also it sounds like the screencast video that you did is also very helpful, and that's something that we're looking at doing with our clients as well to help improve the end user experience.
Right. I mean, the online tool should never replace the traditional public engagement mechanism. And also, we also have to acknowledge the fact that not everyone has access to those online tools, nor do they have the familiarity to use those online tools. So we should make sure that we do both, not one over the other. Sure.
And I think too, just kind of building on that, the idea, hopefully, like this is currently a stopgap. We should always be continuing to do the in-person. With any luck, we've talked, Martin had mentioned this, we've always thought about doing some online, and some of our earlier projects, going places back in 2013, we had virtual open houses where we would post some of the information and just invite for comment. But having these tools, I think, does allow people to interact with it without actually attending if they don't want to or if they cannot. So with any luck, this just becomes a great actual virtual add-on to that public engagement meeting, and maybe then we can actually see numbers for that engagement go up. Rather than having just one avenue, we can be doing 2 or 3.
Well, this was fantastic. Jen, thank you for sharing. There's a meme, there's a GIF in the chat of Howard Hughes saying the way of the future over and over and over and over again. But this was a wonderful presentation. I really appreciate it. I thought that it was interesting you brought up jargon, and considering your previous Jason and the Jargonauts presentations, I'm sure that you are all well versed in not using technobabble to confuse end users.